In the entire run of Rick and Morty, only one person has ever beaten Rick Sanchez, and he did it again and again. While wearing the face of the small, nervous grandson, the whole show trained everyone to ignore. Rick is called the smartest man in the universe. Whole governments and cities of geniuses have thrown themselves at him and lost. Yet every time this one quiet Morty stood across from him, it was Rick who ended up beaten, fooled, or stranded in the dark. The argument here is simple and maybe uncomfortable. Evil Morty is the smarter one. He saw the rigged game every other genius missed, beat Rick using Rick's own tools, and walked away free, while Rick walled off the worlds just to stay the smartest. We are going to trace his every move, from his first appearance to the day he broke the wall. Welcome to Ricktopus. Let's begin. The smartest man in the universe. For most of Rick and Morty, one fact sits under everything else. Rick Sanchez is the smartest person anyone in the show has ever met. Across the first 5 seasons, he even wears it like a title, the smartest man in the universe, and almost nobody who meets him walks away thinking the title is wrong. Armies are afraid of him. Whole governments spend years trying to catch him. Other brilliant people go quiet when he starts talking. The shape of the show bends around the idea that this one old man can think his way out of any room, any trap, any planet, and even out of death itself. To understand why Evil Morty matters at all, the size of that reputation has to be clear first. Rick built a small gun that opens a glowing doorway from one world to another, and with it, he can step between worlds the way a normal person steps between rooms. That single invention is the thing the rest of the show runs on. There are countless worlds out there, and in each one lives another copy of every person. Another Beth, another Jerry, another Morty, and another Rick. Most of those other Ricks are also geniuses. They built a giant city together and filled it with thousands of versions of themselves. And even inside a city packed with thousands of his own kind, Rick is treated as the one at the very center, the sharpest of all the sharp minds. The show does not just say this and move on. It proves it, slowly and often, until the idea soaks into the viewer without any effort. The clearest proof comes at the start of the 3rd season, in the episode called The Rickshank Rickdemption. By that point, a huge space government has spread across many planets and has taken over Earth. Rick and his family are wanted criminals. Instead of running, Rick walks straight up to that government and lets them lock him inside their most secure prison. From the outside, this looks like the end of him. He is the most dangerous man they know, and now he is sitting in a cell, unarmed, surrounded by guards, with no doorway gun and no way out. What the guards do not understand is that the cell is where he wanted to be the whole time. That prison holds more than just dangerous people. It also holds the government's deepest secrets, the kind of information that could bring the entire government down. Rick did not get caught. He delivered himself to the one place that could give him everything he needed. The government wants the secret of his doorway gun, so they bring in a machine that can read his memories, and they send an alien inside his mind to dig the secret out. The alien wanders through Rick's past, watching his life like a movie, searching for the answer. And here is where the size of Rick's mind becomes hard to ignore. He feeds the alien a fake life story. He shows him a sad, believable past, full of loss and regret. Exactly the kind of story that makes someone lower their guard and feel they have won. While the alien is busy believing it, Rick quietly tricks the machine into doing what he actually wants. He uses it to jump his own mind out of his body and into the alien's body instead. From there, everything moves fast, and Rick stays ahead of all of it. A team of other Ricks arrives to kill him, and they succeed in destroying his original body, the one he left behind. A normal plan would die right there. Rick simply jumps again, this time into the body of one of the very Ricks sent to murder him. He keeps moving from mind to mind, taking control of bug soldiers and fellow geniuses alike, wearing them like coats, always one step past everyone trying to stop him. Then comes the part that shows how far ahead he had been thinking all along. He reaches deep into the government's systems and pulls the giant city of Ricks down out of the sky and drops it directly on top of the prison, smashing both to pieces in a single move. And to finish the government for good, he does something that has nothing to do with fighting at all. He breaks into their main computer and ruins their money, making all of it worth nothing in an instant. A government that ruled across the stars falls apart, not because Rick outpunched it, but because he understood that money was the thread holding it together, and he cut that thread from the inside. The way the show tells this story is part of what makes it land. The plan is never explained ahead of time. The viewer only learns each piece of it at the exact moment it pays off, which means the audience is always a few steps behind Rick, the same way every character around him is always a few steps behind. He moves through the whole disaster calmly, almost bored, while soldiers panic and cities fall. Nothing surprises him, because he already saw all of it coming. The episode is built so that the genius is felt rather than described, and by the end there is no real argument left to have about how his mind works. Underneath the action, the episode quietly shows what Rick's intelligence actually is. His mind treats the impossible like a simple list of chores. A prison that no one escapes becomes a door he walks through. A machine built to break into his head becomes a tool he uses to break out. A government that crushed entire planets becomes a problem he solves with patience. And a single clever idea. He does not get lucky. He plans for the worst thing that could happen, and then plans for the worst thing after that, so that even when his own body is destroyed, the plan keeps running without him. The escape from the prison shows what Rick's mind can do to when the whole world is trying to kill him. A different moment, much smaller and much stranger, shows what it can do when nothing is wrong at all. Rick's car runs on a battery, an ordinary-looking box tucked under the hood, and inside that box sits a whole tiny universe that Rick built from nothing. It has a real sun and a real planet and real people living on it, going about their lives, and Rick made all of it for one reason. He needed something to charge his car. The people inside that little universe spend their days running machines that make power, and most of them have no idea that the power they make is being pulled away to start the engine of a vehicle in a world far larger than their own. Rick tricked an entire world of people into being his battery, and he did it so smoothly that they thanked him for the gift of the very machines that trap them. The detail that makes this almost dizzying is what happens further down. One of the cleverest people inside Rick's tiny universe, wanting power of his own, built his own tiny universe to run on, never realizing he was copying the exact trick that had been played on him. A universe inside a universe inside a universe, each one feeding the one above it. All of it set in motion by one old man who wanted a cheaper way to power a car. Building a working world with living minds inside it as a throwaway answer to a small daily annoyance is the kind of thing Rick does without slowing down. It is creation on a scale that should take a god, treated by Rick as barely worth mentioning. The space government that captured him makes the point in its own way. It rules across countless worlds and commands more scientists than anyone could count, and not one of them could work out how his doorway gun functioned. The single most powerful force in that part of existence, with all its resources, could find no way into the secret except to climb inside Rick's own head and hope to watch him think it. Their best minds, working side by side, could not match one drunk old man working alone, and even then, he turned their last desperate effort into the very tool he used to destroy them. This is the part of Rick that the question of who is smarter has to keep in view. He does not only solve problems, he makes things that never existed before, things with their own rules and their own life, pulled straight out of his understanding of how reality works. The doorway gun, the tiny universe, the machine that pours a mind from one body into another, all of it came first from him. Among the countless other versions of himself, every one a genius, every one capable of wonders, he is still the one the rest are measured against, the truest and sharpest of them all. A city of thousands of brilliant Ricks looked around at one another and quietly agreed that this one stood at the center. There is something a little lonely hiding inside all that cleverness, and the show lets it show without ever stopping to point at it. A person who plans for every betrayal is a person who expects to be betrayed. A person who always has an escape ready is a person who never fully trusts the room he is standing in. Rick is never caught off guard because he refuses to ever be caught off guard, and that habit protects him from almost everything. It also leaves him alone at the center of every plan, the only one who knows what is really going on, surrounded by people he treats as pieces on a board. His mind keeps him safe and keeps him separate at the same time. This is the foundation the entire question rests on. For a very long stretch of the show, asking who is smarter than Rick feels almost like a joke with an obvious answer. He outthinks armies. He outthinks governments. He outthinks thousands of copies of himself, each one a genius in their own right. The show pits him against monsters, machines, gods, and other versions of himself, and again, he is the one still standing at the end, calm, unbothered, already thinking about the next thing. The pattern repeats so many times that the viewer stops expecting anyone to ever truly get the better of him. Being the smartest stops feeling like a claim and starts feeling like a simple law of the world he lives in. The size of that pattern is exactly why a single crack in it carries so much weight. When a character has spent years being impossible to outsmart, the rare moment when someone actually does outsmart him stops being a small detail. It becomes the most interesting thing in the whole show. A loss means very little for a character who loses often. A loss means everything for a character who has, for all practical purposes, never truly lost a battle of minds. So the question of who is smarter than Rick is really a question about that one crack, about the one place where the law of his world stopped holding true. The show even tells the viewer, much later, that Rick's grand title was never quite as honest as it sounded. He was called the smartest in the universe, yes, but that title was quietly built on a trick that he and the other Ricks set up long ago, a trick that made sure the contest was always tilted in their favor. The full shape of that trick comes later in the story. What matters here is simply this. The man at the center of the show is the smartest in nearly every room he has ever entered, and the show spent years making that feel certain, almost permanent, almost unbreakable. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And yet, hidden inside the show from very early on, there was one exception. One mind kept slipping past Rick. One enemy kept staying a step ahead of the man who is always a step ahead of everyone else. This enemy did not arrive with an army or a giant weapon or a louder voice. It arrived quietly, in plain sight, wearing the small and nervous face of a child who looked exactly like the grandson trailing along behind Rick in nearly every adventure he ever had. Section 2. The Morty who owned a Rick. The exception arrived early, in the 10th episode of the very first season, the one called Close Rick Counters of the Rickheim. Anyone watching the show in order would have had no reason to to brace for it. By that point, the rules of this world felt settled and plain. Ricks were the brilliant ones, the ones in charge, the ones who opened the doorways and dragged everyone else along behind them. Mortys were the kids. A Morty stammered. A Morty got scared. A Morty tripped, panicked, hid behind furniture, and waited to be rescued by the smarter, older man who always seemed to have a plan. Every adventure followed that same shape, and the show repeated it often enough that nobody questioned it. A Morty was a helper, a passenger, a soft and nervous thing that needed protecting. That settled feeling is the exact thing the episode was built to break. It opens with an attack. A Rick with a long scar across his face steps through a glowing doorway into a quiet family kitchen, and at his side stands a Morty wearing an eye patch. The scarred Rick kills the family's own Rick on the spot and snatches their Morty away. The show plays a small trick with which family is which, sliding the danger closer to the Rick and Morty the audience already knows, until the threat is no longer happening to strangers. The message lands fast. Somewhere out there is a Rick who hunts other Ricks, and he travels with a strange little Morty who never says much and never seems to matter. The blame falls on the wrong man almost at once. The leaders of the giant city of Ricks, a group that calls itself the Council of Ricks, decide that the killer behind all of this is the main Rick of the show. By their count, 27 different Ricks across many worlds have already been murdered, and hundreds of Mortys have gone missing, taken and locked away somewhere. The evidence seems to point straight at one man, and so the council arrests him and prepares to put him to death for crimes he did not commit. He breaks free with his grandson, and the two of them set out to find the real killer themselves, chasing the trail back to a hidden lair tucked away in a dead and lonely world. The scarred Rick is waiting for them. He captures the pair without much trouble, straps the main Rick into a machine that copies memories straight out of a person's head, and explains calmly that he plans to drain everything worth knowing and then kill him. While the machine hums along, the scarred Rick talks. He sneers at the idea that any Rick could truly care about a Morty. In his view, a Morty is a tool, a pet, a thing you use and throw away, and he says as much to the man strapped down in front of him. The machine, though, tells a different story. As it pulls up the memories, the screen fills with year after year of the main Rick quietly slipping into his grandson's life, watching the boy grow up, choosing again and again to be near him. The main Rick, helpless in the chair, watches his own past play back, and his eyes fill with tears. Whatever the scarred Rick believes about Ricks and Mortys, this Rick clearly loves his. The rescue comes from the place no one was watching. All those hundreds of stolen Mortys are still alive, packed together and locked away in the lair, beaten down and hopeless. The main Morty finds his way to them, and something shifts. One by one, the captured Mortys decide they have had enough of being afraid. They rise up together, a flood of small, nervous boys finally moving as one, and they overpower the guards and the helpers. Then they reach the scarred Rick himself. By that point, the scarred Rick is so worn out, so broken by his own life, that he does not even fight them. He welcomes the end. He urges them on while they finish him. The captured Mortys are freed, the main Rick and Morty survive, and from the outside, the whole thing looks like a story that has reached a clean and tidy finish. The bad Rick is dead. The innocent Mortys are saved. Order seems to settle back into place. The real ending happens in the last quiet moments, far from the cheering. Back in the city, a Rick examines the scarred Rick's dead body, the way a doctor might study how someone died. Inside his head, he finds something that should not be there, a small hidden device buried in the brain. The scarred Rick had not been acting on his own at all. He had been controlled from somewhere else the entire time, steered like a puppet on invisible strings, made to hunt and kill and kidnap by a hand no one had thought to look for. And at that very moment, somewhere in the crowded streets of the city, the eye patch Morty stands silent among a sea of other Mortys. He reaches up and slides the eye patch off his face. He drops a small controller onto the ground. He crushes it flat under his shoe. Then he walks away, blending instantly into the crowd of identical boys, and not a single Rick in the entire city realizes that the mastermind behind the whole bloody plan was a Morty. A soft, sad piece of music plays him out, the same quiet melody the show would later save for his most important scenes. He does not gloat. He does not explain. He simply disappears, clean and uncaught, leaving every genius in the city chasing a ghost they will never identify. The way the show hides him is the heart of why the moment works so well. For the entire episode, the eye patch Morty is treated as scenery. The camera barely notices him. He stands slightly behind the scarred Rick, silent, small, easy to forget, exactly the kind of background helper the audience has been trained for a whole season to ignore. The show uses the viewer's own assumptions as a hiding place. Everyone watching has already decided that Mortys do not matter, that the Rick is the one to keep an eye on, and the episode lets that belief sit there, unexamined, right up until the final seconds when it flips the whole thing over. The reveal is held back so long and buried so gently that it rewrites the entire episode the instant it lands. A second viewing becomes a different experience, because now every quiet shot of the little boy in the eye patch is heavy with meaning. What that twist actually says is far bigger than one clever ending. A Morty did this. A Morty outplanned a Rick who hunted Ricks. A Morty fooled the council, the leaders of a city stuffed with thousands of geniuses, every one of them supposedly brilliant. A Morty arranged for an innocent man to be arrested and nearly executed for the killings, kept kept the suspicion pointed in the wrong direction and slipped out the back while the smartest beings in the world congratulated themselves on solving a crime they had completely misread. He did all of it without ever being stronger, faster, or louder than anyone around him. His weapon was the simple fact that no one believed a Morty could be a threat, and he turned that belief into the perfect mask. The way the blame landed on the main Rick was no accident, and the cleverness behind it is easy to miss. The killings across all those worlds were carried out using the main Rick's own doorway gun trail, the unique mark that his travels leave behind, so that every clue pointed straight back at him. To do that, someone had to reach inside the main Rick's gun and copy the one thing that was supposed to be impossible to copy, the private signal that made his travel his and no one else's. In all of existence, only one mind ever managed to tamper with that gun, and it belonged to the small boy in the eye patch. He used the main Rick's own technology to commit the crimes, smeared the main Rick's fingerprints across a string of murders, and let the council follow the trail right to an innocent man. The same hidden skill that framed Rick here is the exact thread that, seasons later, would let Rick finally recognize his enemy, because Rick would remember that only one person had ever broken into his gun. The clue was planted in the boy's very first appearance, sitting in plain sight, waiting for the rest of the story to catch up to it. Look at how many layers of disguise the boy was hiding behind at once. A Morty hid behind a Rick, that Rick hid behind a frame-up of a different Rick, and the whole bloody plan hid behind the simple, shared belief that a Morty could never be the one in charge. Peel back one layer, and there is another, and another, each one built to send the searchers in the wrong direction. The council never even reached the first layer, because they stopped the moment they found a Rick to blame, which is exactly what the boy counted on. He understood that the geniuses hunting him would always prefer a simple answer that matched their assumptions over a strange one that challenged them, and he built his entire plan on that weakness in their thinking. His patience is worth sitting with, because it is the quietest and most frightening thing about him. To run a plan like this, the boy had to spend a long stretch of time controlling his own grandfather, sending him from world to world, managing every killing and every kidnapping, all while keeping himself perfectly invisible. He never rushed, he never showed himself, he never made the one careless move that would have given him away. A mind that can hold a plan that large in its head for that long, without a single slip, while wearing the face of a frightened child, is a mind working far above the people chasing it. The council had numbers, resources, and thousands of years of combined genius. The boy had patience and a clear view of how everyone around him thought, and that was enough to beat all of it. The details that come out about him only make the picture colder. The scarred Rick he controlled was, at the start, his own grandfather, his own Rick, the genius meant to look after him. Instead of being protected by that man, the eye patch Morty forced machine parts into his grandfather's head and took the controls. He turned the person who was supposed to guide him into a puppet that killed on command. At least once, the trapped Rick tried to end his own life just to escape what he had become, and the boy controlling him simply shut him back down and forced him to keep going. There is no warmth anywhere in that arrangement. There is only use. The grandfather became a tool, and when the tool finally broke, the boy crushed his controller underfoot and walked off without a backward glance. That coldness is exactly why the brain scan scene earlier in the episode matters so much. In the chair, the main Rick wept over his memories of his grandson, caught in a love he would never say out loud. The eye patch Morty stands as the dark mirror of that moment. He is a Morty with none of the softness, a grandchild who feels nothing for the man tied to him by blood, who looks at his own Rick and sees a machine to be wired up and aimed. The whole show rests on the strange, prickly bond between a Rick and a Morty, on the idea that underneath all the cruelty, there is something real holding the two of them together. This boy is what is left when that bond rots all the way through and turns into pure usefulness. He keeps his grandfather close, the way a person keeps a screwdriver close, for as long as it does the job. There is also a reason he surrounded himself with all those stolen Mortys, and it ties back to how careful his thinking really is. A crowd of Mortys does something useful for a hiding Rick. It muddies the search, makes it hard for the city to pick one mind out of the noise and track it down. By hoarding hundreds of captured Mortys, the eye patch Morty wrapped himself in a kind of fog that kept the council from finding either him or his puppet. The kidnappings looked like cruelty for its own sake. Underneath, they were part of the disguise, one more layer between him and the geniuses hunting for the killer. Every piece of his plan did at least two jobs at once, and that habit of stacking purposes is the same habit that makes Rick himself so hard to beat. There is one more thing the episode quietly shows, easy to overlook in the rush of the ending. When the captured Mortys finally rose up and tore the puppet Rick apart, they did it together, all at once, the moment they stopped being afraid. One Morty was helpless. Hundreds of Mortys who decided in the same breath to fight back were strong enough to bring down a Rick with their bare hands. The boy in the eye patch is what one fully awakened Morty can do alone. The uprising in that lair was a small, early glimpse of what the rest of them could do if they ever followed his example, and that glimpse would matter more and more as the story went on. Set against the foundation built in the first section, the size of this becomes clear. Rick is the man no one outsmarts. Whole governments and whole cities of geniuses throw themselves at him and fall short. And here, in only the 10th episode of the entire entire show, Morty quietly outplayed a city full of those geniuses and escaped without a scratch and without a name. For a character who almost never loses a battle of minds, even a single clean defeat carries enormous weight, and this was not the main Rick losing to another Rick. This was the entire society of Ricks being fooled by the one kind of creature they had all agreed was beneath them. The crack in the rule was placed at the very start, long before most viewers understood what they had seen. For a long time after the eye patch, Morty became a mystery the audience could not put down. He vanished from the story almost as quickly as he appeared, leaving behind a single haunting image and 1,000 unanswered questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? What did he actually want? The show let him sit in the dark for seasons, a small cold shape at the edge of everything, while the main Rick went on with his adventures as if the whole thing had been a forgettable afternoon. The seed had been planted though, and it would grow into the central threat of the entire series. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. His first move had been to win from the shadows, hidden behind a puppet and a crowd and a clever lie. That was only ever a starting point. The next time the boy in the eye patch surfaced, he would not hide behind a controlled Rick at all. He would step into the open, stand in front of every Rick and Morty in the city, look the whole society of geniuses in the eye, and ask them to hand him their power, all while they still had no idea who he truly was. Section 3. The President. 2 whole seasons passed before the boy in the eye patch surfaced again, and when he did, the world around him had changed in a way that he himself had helped to cause, even if no one realized it. The giant city of Ricks had been through a disaster. The main Rick, in his escape from the space prison shown earlier in the story, had dropped that very city out of the sky and smashed it, and in doing so, he had killed the Council of Ricks, the small group of leaders who had ruled the place for as long as it had existed. With those leaders dead, the city was left broken and leaderless, a society of geniuses, with a hole at the top where its rulers used to sit. The main Rick walked away from that wreckage, thinking he had simply settled a score. What he had actually done was clear a path, and a patient enemy was waiting at the end of it. The episode that shows all of this is a strange one, and the show builds it that way on purpose. It opens as though the story will follow the main Rick and Morty on a fun trip to an underwater city. Then it drops the two of them almost entirely and sends the camera somewhere else, deep into the rebuilt city of Ricks, where the real story lives. For nearly the whole hour, the main characters are gone, off having an adventure the audience barely sees, while the show quietly studies the place they left behind. What the city has become is grim. The Ricks here are no longer a gleaming club of equal geniuses. They scrub floors, work factory lines, drink in dirty bars, and scrape by in a place that has clearly fallen apart. The Mortys have it worse. They are treated as a lower class, looked down on, pushed into the poorer corners of the city, watched and policed, and reminded constantly that they sit beneath the Ricks. There is a whole rundown district where the Mortys live, full of hardship and quiet resentment. The society built to celebrate the brilliance of Rick has rotted into something cruel and unequal, and everyone living in it can feel the rot. Into that anger steps a candidate. With the old council gone, the city holds its first real vote to choose a leader, a president to run the place. Several Ricks throw themselves into the race, each one sure the job belongs to a Rick, and then, against all of it, one Morty decides to run too. This candidate Morty is the long shot, the joke of the race, the one the news anchors mock, and the one everybody expects to lose badly. A Morty running to lead a city of Ricks sounds absurd to almost everyone in it. He does not lose. He stands up at the debate and speaks, and something about him catches fire. He talks about unity, about a city where Ricks and Mortys are not divided into masters and servants, about change for a place that is sick of its own misery. The crowd, full of beaten down Ricks and overlooked Mortys, leans toward him. He has a way of saying exactly what the room is aching to hear, and by the end of his speech, the long shot has become a real threat to win. Right after that triumph, he does something cold and strange. He fires the Morty who had been running his campaign, the helper who had stood beside him and worked to get him this far. The firing is sudden and unkind, and it leaves that Morty bitter and stung, cast out just as the campaign is taking off. The cast-out helper does not stay quiet for long. A mysterious investigator, Rick, approaches him and slips him a set of secret files. Inside those files is the truth. The charming candidate Morty, the underdog stealing the city's heart, is the same boy who once wore the eye patch and controlled a Rick like a puppet. The files lay it bare. The friendly face on every poster belongs to the mastermind who fooled the whole city 2 seasons before. Armed with that knowledge and burning with the hurt of being thrown away, the fired Morty makes his move. At the next big rally, in front of the crowd, he pulls out a gun and shoots candidate Morty. It is the kind of moment that should end a story. The villain, exposed and gunned down at his own event, brought low by the one person who saw through him. He survives. The shot does not finish him, and in the days that follow, the votes are counted, and candidate Morty wins, narrowly, becoming the first leader the city has ever chosen by its own hand. The mocked long shot is now President Morty, the head of the entire society of Ricks. The one person who knew the truth does not get to share it. A pair of guards, the kind who protect important leaders, take the fired campaign helper aside, and while they calmly chat about how close the election turned out to be, they toss him out a door into open space and leave him to die die among the stars. The secret files float out there with him. Once again, the single person who discovered who the boy really was is erased, and the proof drifts away into the dark where no one will ever read it. The new president wastes no time showing what kind of leader he intends to be. Beneath the public election, the city had a second, hidden layer of power, a secret group of rich and influential Ricks who had truly run things from behind the curtain for years. President Morty goes to meet them. These hidden Ricks expect to keep their grip, to treat the young president as a figurehead they can steer, the way powerful people often expect to manage whoever sits in the chair. They remind him that they were the ones running the city long before any of this. The president listens. He asks mildly, which of them still believes that arrangement holds? A few of them agree that it does, confident in their own importance. He snaps his fingers, and every Rick who opposed him drops dead at once. Then he pours himself a drink, calm as anything, and remarks that speeches are for the campaign, and now the time for action has come. The episode ends the same way his first one did, with a slow, sad piece of music and a row of floating bodies. The dead members of the hidden group are flushed out into space, where they join the other people who died across the hour, drifting silently in the cold. And among the bodies, where the audience can finally see it, float the secret documents that name President Morty for what he is. The same haunting melody that played him out of the shadows in the first season plays him into power now, tying the two moments together for anyone paying attention. There is one last beat. The main Rick and Morty return from their underwater trip, cheerful and unaware, and Morty asks whether the rebuilt city is something to worry about. The main Rick brushes it off completely. He says, with total confidence, that the place will never have any effect on their lives again. He is the smartest man in the universe, and he is dead wrong, and he has no idea how wrong he is. The way the show hides the president's identity is the same trick it pulled before, scaled up. For most of the hour, the camera wanders through side stories, following a corrupt Morty cop and his partner, a sad factory worker, a string of ordinary city lives, so that candidate Morty feels like just one thread among many. The big reveal is buried under all of that wandering and held back until the final minutes. The misdirection starts in the very first scene, with the promise of an underwater adventure that never really happens. By the time the truth lands, the audience has been looking everywhere, except at the one place it mattered, which is exactly where the boy in the eye patch always wants people to look. What the reveal actually shows is a leap in his methods. In the first season, he won by hiding, behind a puppet, behind a crowd, behind everyone's assumptions. Here, he wins in the open, on a stage, in front of every Rick and Morty in the city, and he gets them to hand him the power themselves. He did not break the door down. He convinced the people inside to open it and invite him through. He read the city's pain with perfect accuracy. He saw the anger of the overlooked Mortys and the bitterness of the fallen Ricks, and he turned all of that feeling into a ladder, climbing it one honest-sounding promise at a time. His patience is the part that should sit heaviest. He waited through 2 full seasons, quiet and unseen, building toward a single plan that depended on the city falling apart and holding an election in the first place. He crafted a warm, likable public face, a candidate people could love, the same way he once crafted a puppet people would fear. Both were masks. Both were tools shaped to fit the exact moment they were needed. A mind that can build a fake-friendly leader as carefully as it once built a fake villain is a mind that understands how people work at a deep and unsettling level. He even understood something about power that cruder villains miss. After taking the throne, he did not simply rule by terror, he kept several of his public promises on the surface. He changed the lessons taught at the school for young Mortys. He adjusted the rules for the city's police so that a good and decent officer who had done the right thing would not be punished for it. He spared the hidden Ricks, who were willing to admit he was truly in charge, and only killed the ones who insisted on controlling him. A person who grabs power and immediately becomes a monster invites a revolt. This boy grabbed power and made just enough of the city better that people had reason to believe in him. He knew that real control needs the look of fairness wrapped around it, and he built that look on purpose. Set beside the main Rick, the comparison sharpens into something clear. The main Rick toppled an entire space government by sneaking into its prison and ruining its money from the inside, a cold and brilliant attack on the machinery holding a society together. The boy in the eye patch toppled and then took over an entire society of geniuses by winning their hearts and their votes, a cold and brilliant attack on the feelings holding a society together. One reached for the gears, the other reached for the hopes. Both understood the system they were attacking well enough to break it from within, and both walked away on top, while everyone else was still trying to understand what had happened. The pattern that began in the first season repeats here with terrible neatness. Hide in plain sight, let the world underestimate you. Let the one person who uncovers the truth be destroyed, and let the proof die with them. Walk away clean while the sad music plays. The boy did all of it again, only this time the prize was not a quiet escape into a crowd. The prize was a city, a society, the entire shining proof of how special a Rick is supposed to be, now sitting under the thumb of the very kind of creature it had spent its whole existence looking down on. By this point, the count is plain. A Morty has fooled the city of Ricks twice. The first time he slipped away as a ghost no one could name. The second time he climbed onto the highest seat in their world and killed the hidden men who thought they owned him. The being the whole show treated as a harmless passenger, now ruled the place built to celebrate the smartest man alive, and the smartest man alive sat somewhere far away, joking with his grandson, certain it would never touch him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Ruling that city, though, was never the true goal. A society of broken geniuses was a small thing to a mind aiming at something vast. The presidency was a key, and the key fit a single enormous door, a door that no Rick in all of history had ever managed to open. Underneath the city, sealed away, waited the one machine powerful enough to break through a wall that had been built around the entire universe, a wall that the main Rick himself had helped to raise, for reasons the boy in the eye patch understood far better than the man who built it. Section 4. The Wall Around the Worlds. 4 seasons after the boy in the eye patch first slipped away into a crowd, the show finally pulled the curtain all the way back, and the answer it gave reshaped everything that came before it. The episode brings the main Rick and Morty back to the city of Ricks by accident, wandering into the place Rick had sworn would never matter to them again. Within minutes of arriving, the main Rick looks at the president of the city, the leader everyone there has been following, and he goes cold. He recognizes the face. He knows, instantly and with total certainty, who he is looking at, because there is one thing only one person in all of existence has ever managed to do, and that is tamper with his doorway gun. The president is the boy in the eye patch. Rick has finally found him, and for once, Rick is the one caught off guard. He fights his way out and escapes with his grandson, but escape is the only move left to him, and that itself is the first sign of how the power has shifted. The man who outthinks armies is suddenly reacting, running, scrambling to stay alive, while the boy he underestimated for years sits calmly above it all and lets the plan unfold. The trap the president springs on his own city is a small, perfect example of how his mind works. Across every loudspeaker in the city, his voice rings out, ordering everyone to stay exactly where they are, over and over, telling them not to leave. And of course, the moment a crowd of frightened, rebellious geniuses is told to stay put, most of them try to flee. That is exactly what he counted on. While he was president, he had secretly changed every doorway gun in the city, so that anyone who tried to escape would not slip away to safety. Their guns would instead fling them straight into worlds where they would be killed the instant they arrived. So the order to stay was really an order dressed up to make people run, and running was death. He understood his own people so completely that he could herd them toward their own destruction, simply by telling them to do the opposite. He weaponized their predictability. He turned their cleverness and their stubbornness into the very thing that wiped them out. The city tears itself apart. Rick and Morty climb down toward the bottom of it, hoping to find a fresh supply of the special fuel that makes the doorway guns work, the only thing that might get them home. The wells are dry. Every drop has been drained. The boy in the eye patch has thought of that too, and closed off that escape long before they reached for it. Cornered, Rick finally starts explaining, and the explanation is the heart of the entire show. The president needed something from Rick to pull off his plan, and he had needed it for years. Buried in Rick's mind were the plans for a single enormous machine, the engine hidden deep beneath the city, powerful enough to do something no one had ever done. That is why, all the way back in the first season, the boy had arranged to copy Rick's memories. The brain scan from that long ago episode was never about killing Rick. It was about stealing the one set of plans he needed. The presidency, one in the open in front of the whole city, was never really about ruling. It was about getting his hands on the machine those plans described. Every move, stretched across years and seasons, had been building toward this single moment, and almost no one had seen the shape of it until now. Morty refuses to keep moving until he understands why any of this is happening, and so Rick shows him the truth about himself, the real story underneath all the jokes. Long ago, another version of Rick murdered this Rick's wife and young daughter, and the grief and rage of that loss is what drove him to finish his doorway gun and tear across the worlds. The sad fake backstory the space government had once tried to pull out of his head turned out to be mostly true. Underneath the smartest man in the universe is a man broken by loss, who built his power out of pain. Then they reach the engine, and the boy in the eye patch is waiting for them, calm as he has always been, ready to explain the thing that gives the whole series its meaning. He tells Morty about the wall. Long ago, the Ricks built a wall around all the endless worlds. There are countless universes, more than anyone could ever count, and in some of them, Rick is the smartest being alive, and in countless others, he simply is not. What the Ricks did was wall off only the worlds where Rick is the smartest, and cut them away from all the rest. They built a barrier around their own greatness, sealing themselves inside a section of reality where being the smartest man alive was guaranteed. This is the fact that turns the entire question of who is smarter on its head. The main Rick is the smartest man in the universe, yes. The catch is that the universe he lives in was trimmed and shaped on purpose to make sure that would always be true. He sits at the exact center of that walled-off space, the truest of all the Ricks, the one the others measure themselves against. His title was never an honest contest he won. It was a result the Ricks arranged ahead of time by throwing away every world where they would lose. A person who only ever races opponents he is certain to beat will, of course, always win. That does not make him the fastest runner alive. It makes him the runner who built the track. The boy in the eye patch saw the track for what it was. He understood understood that he and every other Morty had spent their whole existence trapped inside a kind of giant crib built around a giant baby who insisted on always being the biggest, the smartest, the most important thing in the room. The wall kept Rick safe inside a comfortable little bubble where his greatness could never truly be challenged. The same wall kept every Morty locked into a life of service, born and raised to follow a Rick around, treated as a passenger and a tool, never allowed near a world where the order might be different. The boy refused to accept that. He decided he would rather break out of the cage at any cost than spend forever as the smaller half of a rigged pair. So he uses the machine. He fires up the great engine beneath the city, and it begins to tear open a hole, ripping a passage through the wall that no Rick had ever managed to crack. As the engine roars, the city floods, and the place tears itself to pieces around them. Through it all, the boy in the eye patch stays steady, watching his lifelong plan finish exactly as he designed it. There is one last cruel touch that says everything about who he is. He offers Morty a choice, a chance to come with him, to leave Rick behind, and step out into the wider worlds beyond the wall, into a place where no Rick rules over him. The main Rick, worn down, even gives his grandson a quiet sort of blessing to go. Morty chooses to stay with Rick anyway, choosing the messy bond he knows over the freedom he is offered. And the moment Morty makes that choice, the boy in the eye patch reveals that the offer was a lie from the start. There was never a real chance to come along. He simply wanted to show Morty something about himself, and he did. The main Rick, watching, notes with grim humor that Mortys are practically built to forgive, and that is part of why they are so easy to keep. Even in his final moment in the city, the boy is studying people, proving a point, staying 3 steps ahead of everyone's feelings. Then he is gone. The hole tears fully open, and he passes through the wall and out into the larger reality on the other side, the part no Rick had ever reached, a place free of the rigged little corner the Ricks built for themselves. The escape wipes out nearly the entire population of the city, almost every Rick and almost every Morty in it, all spent like fuel so that one Morty could get out. On the far side, his doorway gun glows a different color from Rick's, a small sign that he can now reach worlds that were always sealed away before, worlds where Rick was never promised to be the smartest. He has gone somewhere the main Rick, for all his genius, cannot easily follow. The main Rick and Morty are left behind, stranded, washed up far from home with no clear way back, Rick's doorway gun useless and tossed aside. The smartest man in the universe ends the season beaten, stuck, and quiet, while the boy he ignored for years walks free in a place beyond his reach. The way the show handles this reveal is part of why it cuts so deep. Through the whole sequence, the boy in the eye patch is the one calmly explaining the world, and Rick is the one being explained to. The usual shape of the show flips completely. For years, Rick was the teacher, the one who understood everything, while everyone else stumbled to keep up. Here, he sits and listens while a Morty lays out the truth about Rick's own life, his own society, his own hidden cheat, and there is nothing Rick can do to stop any of it. The boy never raises his voice. He never needs to. The power in the room belongs entirely to him, and the show lets that quiet, total control speak for itself. The whole plan, seen all at once, is staggering in its patience. The brain scan in the first season, the long silence, the rise through an election in the third, the secret tampering with every gun, the throne, and finally, the machine. It stretches across years of the show's time and the characters' lives, a single thread pulled taut from one end of the story to the other. He set the trap in the 10th episode of the first season, and sprang it in the last episode of the 5th, and every step in between was a piece of one design. Few minds in any story plan on that scale. Fewer still execute every step without a single misfire, and it answers, at least for a long stretch of the show, the question this whole story circles around. The main Rick built a wall to make absolutely certain he would always be the smartest, because the thought of a world where he was not the smartest was something he could not bear to live with. That is a strange kind of fear hiding inside all that genius, a need to remove every possible challenge rather than face one. The boy in the eye patch looked at that same wall and wanted only to get past it, no matter what it cost him, because he refused to spend forever inside a game that someone else had rigged. One mind built a cage to feel safe. The other mind picked the lock and walked out. Being the best inside a contest you fixed is one kind of cleverness. Seeing the fix and beating it and stepping into the honest open where the outcome is no longer guaranteed is another kind entirely, and for the first time the show suggests out loud that the second kind might be the greater one. The main Rick had spent his last calm moment in the city seasons earlier, swearing the place would never touch his life again. That promise now lay in ruins along with the city itself. He had been wrong, in the largest way a person can be wrong, fooled across years by a child he never thought to fear, and left stranded in the dark to think about it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That should have been the end of the story between them, the boy gone forever to a place beyond reach, the old man defeated and stuck. The strange truth is that it was not the end at all. Years of the show's time later, the two of them would find themselves standing shoulder to shoulder, the man and the boy who had outwitted him, working the same problem from the same side. Because out in the larger worlds beyond the wall, there was still one enemy loose, the single Rick that even the smartest man in the universe had never been able to hunt down, and catching him would take both of their minds at once. Section 5. The enemy neither could catch. The episode that brought the man man and the boy back together, opens by finally showing where the boy came from. It begins with a scene that looks ordinary. A Rick and a Morty returning from one more adventure, the Morty worn down and angry about the way his Rick treats him. The mistreatment is nothing special by the show's standards, the same casual cruelty 1,000 Mortys swallow every day. This Morty does not swallow it. He builds a small device, an eye patch, slips it on, and with it, he takes control of his Rick completely. That quiet moment is the birth of the boy in the eye patch. He was not born a monster. He was an ordinary Morty who reached the end of his patience and decided he would never be the smaller half of the pair again. From there, the rampage begins. The killings, the captured Mortys, the long road that leads to everything already seen. That origin matters because it reframes him one more time. The most dangerous mind the show ever produced started as a tired kid who simply had enough. Any Morty, pushed far enough, treated as a tool for long enough, could in theory become him. He is what the whole rigged system creates when one of its prisoners finally refuses to play along. After his escape through the wall, the boy built himself a quiet life. Out in the wider worlds, free at last, he settled into a peaceful existence, alone in a grand home, gathering what he needed to keep his hideaway safe and hidden. No schemes, no throne, no enemies. The thing he had wanted all along turned out to be small and simple. He wanted to be left alone, somewhere no Rick could reach him, and for a while, he had exactly that. His peace breaks because of Rick. The main Rick has spent this stretch of the story obsessed with a single hunt, chasing the one enemy that has haunted him since the start, the version of himself who murdered his wife and daughter. That other Rick, the worst and most slippery of them all, has evaded capture for decades. To flush him out, the main Rick starts tearing at the wall around the worlds, shaking reality itself, killing off a long line of fakes and body doubles that his enemy left scattered as decoys. All that shaking ripples outward, and the ripples reach the boy's hideaway beyond the wall, cracking his defenses, ruining the calm he worked so hard to build. Annoyed more than anything, the boy opens a doorway and goes to confront the man wrecking his quiet. What happens next is the clearest test the show ever stages of whose mind is sharper, because for once, the two of them are aimed at the same problem at the same time. The boy looks at how Rick has been hunting his enemy and sees, almost instantly, that Rick is doing it wrong. Rick has been grinding away at his search for ages, slow and clumsy, and the boy points out the flaw and offers a smarter, faster way to narrow down where the real enemy is hiding. Rick takes the advice. The advice works. The student, the supposed lesser half, the passenger, corrects the smartest man in the universe on a hunt Rick has obsessed over for years, and the correction is what finally starts to crack the case open. Realizing that helping Rick finish this is the quickest path back to his own peace and quiet, the boy stays. The improved search drags one of the enemy's fakes into the open, but the fake is a trap. A strange dark fuel yanks all three of them, Rick, Morty, and the boy in the eye patch, into a hidden prison built by the enemy himself, a cage designed to catch any Rick foolish enough to come hunting. The prison is meant to be impossible to escape. It can shut down a doorway gun, leaving its captives stranded, and here is the detail that decides everything. The prison can shut down Rick's gun, and it can shut down the boy's gun, but it cannot shut down both at the same time. Two clever minds with two separate guns is a problem the cage was never built to hold. The enemy designed his trap to catch Rick's, and he designed it well, and it would have held the main Rick the way it had held so many Ricks before. He never planned for a Morty. The boy's presence is the single thing that turns an inescapable death into a way out. Inside the cage, the enemy plays one more cruel game. A recording of him tricks all the trapped Ricks into turning on each other, promising the last one standing a chance to get their dead wife back. The Ricks fall for it and slaughter one another until only the main Rick is left alive, along with the two Mortys. Then, the cage spits out a killing machine, wearing the murdered wife's face, a final twist of the night. The three of them fight it down together. The cage begins to tear itself apart, set to destroy everyone inside, and the main Rick and the boy in the eye patch combine what they know, pooling two of the greatest minds in existence, and break free, landing back in Rick's own workshop. Using the last of that strange dark fuel from the trap, Rick at last pins down the true location of the enemy he has hunted his whole life. Rick storms the enemy's lair, smashing through robot guards, closing in on the man who took everything from him. The fight is brutal, and Rick fights it with the kind of cleverness that has always defined him. At one point, he turns his enemy's own gun back on him, and tricks him into blowing off half his own face. This is the main Rick at his most dangerous. Decades of grief and rage, finally meeting their target. The truth of how the enemy actually falls, though, belongs to the boy. Without anyone noticing, the boy in the eye patch had switched places with the regular Morty, slipping into the fight in disguise. When the moment comes, he is the one who overpowers the enemy, the worst Rick of them all, the one Rick who had beaten the main Rick before. The boy uses hidden weapons built into his own body, beams from his hands, mechanical arms from his back, a tiny shock hidden in his fingertip, and with them, he brings down the deadliest version of Rick in all the worlds. The enemy, like the council, like the hidden group of rich Ricks, like the entire city, like the main Rick himself, never once considered that a clever Morty might be the thing that finished him. Having defeated the enemy, the boy could have killed him. Instead, he restrains him, steals the plans for the most terrible weapon in existence, a weapon able to erase a person from every world at once, everywhere, all at the same time. Then he revives the main Rick and points him at the helpless enemy, handing the old man the moment he has chased for his entire life. Rick gets his revenge. The hunt that defined him for decades finally ends, and it ends only because a Morty engineered the trap, fixed the search, broke them out of the cage, and physically beat the one foe Rick could never beat alone, then chose to give Rick the finish as a kind of gift. The way the show frames this carries the whole point quietly underneath the action. The main Rick gets his victory, the one that matters most to him, the closing of the deepest wound he carries. The victory is real, and it is his. It also could not have happened without the boy he ignored, underestimated, and lost to years before. Rick alone toppled a space government, outsmarted whole cities of geniuses, escaped every trap ever set for him. Rick alone could not catch one single Rick. The thing that finally got it done was Rick's mind plus the boy's mind, working the same problem side by side, and within that team-up, it is the boy who spots the flaws, breaks the cage, and lands the blow. His weapons and his cybernetic body are worth pausing on, because they show how far he has carried himself. The boy did not simply inherit a clever plan. He built his own body into a weapon, packed with tools that let him stand toe-to-toe with the most lethal Rick alive, and win. He invents. He upgrades himself. He fights and thinks at the same time, never losing the calm that has marked him since his first appearance. The nervous, stammering passenger that the show trained everyone to dismiss is now a being who can outsearch, outtrap, and outfight the deadliest mind in the multiverse. Set against the foundation of this whole story, the comparison has shifted about as far as it can. In the beginning, asking who was smarter than Rick felt like a joke with an obvious answer. Now the answer keeps coming back to the same small figure. A Morty fooled the city of Ricks twice. A Morty escaped a wall no Rick had ever cracked. A Morty corrected Rick's lifelong hunt, freed them from an unbeatable cage, and personally defeated the Rick and utter Dovior Eden the main Rick had failed to defeat. Each step has been larger than the last, and each step has put the boy further ahead. The boy gets the last word here, the way he always does. With the enemy finished and the terrible weapon now in his hands, he tells the main Rick and Morty, plainly, to never come looking for him again. The threat behind the request needs no explaining. He holds a weapon that can erase anyone from all of existence at once, and he has just proven, in front of them, that he can outthink and outfight both of them together. Then he opens a doorway and leaves, free once more, untouched once more, carrying off the most dangerous object in the multiverse, having helped the smartest man in the universe achieve the one thing he could not achieve alone, and asking only for the quiet he wanted from the start. There is one small, strange note in all of this that even the boy acknowledges. Working alongside the main Rick, he admits that this Rick is somehow different from the endless other Ricks, a little more than the rest. He says it the way a person notes a useful fact, filing it away, treating the difference as something he might use rather than something he respects. Even his rare moment of acknowledgement is cold and calculating. One more observation from a mind that never stops measuring the people around it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So the scales seem to have tipped fully and clearly toward the boy in the eye patch. He has won at every turn, escaped every consequence, and beaten Rick on Rick's own ground. And yet, looking back across the whole long story, a quiet and uncomfortable question begins to take shape underneath all his victories. Every great thing the boy has done has rested, in some way, on something taken from Rick. The plans for the engine that broke the wall came from inside Rick's own head. The hunt he corrected was Rick's hunt. The enemy Rick's enemy. The kill handed back to Rick at the end. The doorway technology. The brilliance. The very world he climbed through. All of it was built first by a Rick, which raises a question the show seems almost afraid to ask out loud. The boy in the eye patch has clearly outmaneuvered Rick again and again, but the mind he used to do it may never have been entirely his own. Section 6. A borrowed genius. 5 sections of evidence have pointed the same direction, toward the small figure in the eye patch. The Morty who fooled a city, escaped a wall, and beat the deadliest mind in the worlds. A fair look at any question, though, means turning it over and pressing hard on the part that does not fit. And there is a part that does not fit. Underneath every one of the boy's victories sits a quiet, awkward truth. Almost nothing he ever did was built from his own mind alone. The pieces he used to climb so high were again and again pieces he took from Rick. Start with his single greatest achievement, the one that defines him, the escape through the wall around the worlds. That escape ran on the giant engine buried beneath the city, and the plans for that engine did not come from the boy's own thinking. They came out of Rick's head. The whole reason the boy arranged to copy Rick's memories, all the way back in the first season, was to steal the instructions for that machine. The brain scan was the seed of everything. Without sneaking into Rick's mind and lifting the design, there is no engine he understands, no way through the wall, no life beyond it. His proudest moment, the thing that made him who he is, was only possible because he reached into the smartest man in the universe and helped himself to what was already there. The stage he performed on was Rick's as well. Step back and look at the entire world the boy moved through, and almost all of it traces back to a Rick. The doorway guns that let anyone travel between worlds were Rick's invention. The giant city of geniuses was built by Rick's. The engine that broke the wall was a Rick machine. The wall itself, the very cage the boy spent his whole life plotting to escape, was raised by the Ricks, and the main Rick stood at the center of building doing it. Every road the boy walked, every tool he picked up, every door he opened, had been laid down first by the kind of mind he set himself against. He was a brilliant traveler through a country that Rick drew the map of. The wall deserves special attention because it cuts to the heart of the comparison. The boy's life's work was getting past that wall, and the show treats that escape as a towering feat, which it was. Yet someone had to imagine and build the wall in the first place. Picture the size of that act. The Ricks looked at an endless ocean of worlds, more than any number could hold, and they figured out how to draw a line through infinity itself, walling off only the slice where Rick is the smartest and cutting it cleanly away from all the rest. That is an act of imagination and skill on a scale almost too large to picture. Breaking through a wall is hard. Conceiving of a wall around the endless worlds and then actually constructing it is harder still. The boy spent years and an entire city's worth of lives to undo a thing that Rick and his fellow Ricks managed to make. The builder of the cage and the escaper of the cage are both impressive. The builder did the heavier thinking. The hunt for the worst Rick of all tells the same story in miniature. When the boy corrected Rick's search and sped it along, that was a real and sharp piece of work, a genuine improvement that Rick himself had missed. The hunt belonged to Rick though. The enemy was Rick's enemy. The decades of obsession, the tearing at the wall, the long chase, all of it was Rick's drive and Rick's design. The boy arrived late, polished a method that already existed, helped survive a trap, and then handed the final blow back to the man who had been chasing it all along. Improving someone else's plan is a fine skill. It sits a step below being the one whose plan it was in the first place. Now set beside all of that what Rick actually does, over and over, across the whole show. Rick makes things. He makes things that have never existed before, out of nothing but his own understanding. He invented travel between worlds itself, the single discovery the entire series rests on, the thing the boy, and the city, and the wall, and the engine all depend on. He powers his own spaceship with a whole tiny universe he built by hand, a complete little world full of living people he tricked into generating his electricity, an entire reality created to charge a battery. When he was locked in a space prison, he built, on the spot, a way to pour his own mind out of his body and into someone else's, hopping from person to escape. His workshop spills over with weapons and gadgets and machines, each one dreamed up and built by him. Rick is a maker at the deepest level. He looks at the rules of reality and writes new ones. The boy in the eye patch has never once been shown doing that. His brilliance is real, but it is a different shape. He takes, he plans, he waits. He reads people better than almost anyone alive, and turns their own feelings and their own tools against them. He copies a mind and steals its secrets. He repurposes a city, a throne, an engine, all things that already existed, and bends them toward his single goal. Every great move he makes is a brilliant use of something that was already in the world, placed there by a Rick. He is the finest strategist the show has ever produced, and he is, at the same time, a kind of thief, and those two things are tangled together so tightly that they cannot be separated. This needs to be said fairly, because the boy is not a mere copycat, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of lie. He does invent. He built the small device that let him control his grandfather. He built his own doorway gun, one that glows a different color and reaches worlds Rick's gun never could. He rebuilt his own body into a weapon, packed with beams and arms and hidden shocks strong enough to bring down the deadliest Rick alive. Those are not nothing. A Morty who can engineer all of that is a genius by any honest measure. The trouble is that even his inventions live inside Rick's world. His gun is still a doorway gun, the same basic idea Rick discovered, made sharper. The extra reach of that gun exists mostly because he broke through the wall, and the wall was Rick's to break. His weaponized body follows the same path Rick walked when Rick filled his own body with machines long before. The boy improves, extends, and sharpens the work of Rick's. He has never been shown laying a brand new foundation the way Rick lays them as casually as breathing. The pattern of leaning on Rick runs even deeper than the tools. At the key moments, the boy needed Rick himself, alive and working, for his plans to function. He needed Rick's living mind to scan for the engine plans. He needed Rick's second doorway gun to escape the trap that could only shut down one gun at a time, which means that without Rick beside him, the boy would have died in that cage like all the Ricks before him. He needed Rick to finish off the worst Rick, so much so that he revived Rick on purpose and pointed him at the enemy. Time and again, the boy's cleverness only reached its goal because Rick was there to supply the missing piece. A mind that repeatedly requires its rival in order to win is, in one clear sense, the more dependent of the two, however cold and careful it is. All of this recolors the boy's long list of victories. Beating the smartest man in the universe is astonishing, and beating him using his own knowledge and his own machines is astonishing in a particular, chilling way. Still, there is a difference between defeating a builder with the builder's own tools and being the one who could have built those tools at all. The boy turned Rick's genius against Rick. He never had to generate that genius. He inherited a finished world and proved himself a master at moving the pieces around inside it, while Rick was the one who carved the pieces and set the board. Outplaying the inventor is a triumph of strategy. Being the inventor is a triumph of raw mind, and raw mind is the older and rarer gift. So the honest counter-argument lands somewhere like this. In the contest of pure creation, of the ability to look at the bare rules of existence and forge forge something new, Rick stands clearly above. The technology of the entire multiverse flows from him. The boy's whole life happened inside the space Rick's inventions opened up. If smarter means the deeper, more original, more world-making intelligence, then the title still belongs to the old man, and the boy, for all his cunning, is something more like the most gifted student who ever turned on his teacher, using the teacher's own lessons to do it. And yet, even after laying all of that out, the question refuses to close, because the strategist's gift is not a small one, and the boy's record is not a fluke. Outthinking the smartest man alive is not luck, and doing it 5 separate times across years of careful planning is not theft alone. A thief who only steals can be caught. A thief who steals the right thing, at the right moment, after foreseeing exactly how the smartest man in the universe would react, is doing something the word thief cannot fully hold. The boy understood Rick well enough to use Rick as a tool, the way Rick uses everyone else as tools. There is a strange symmetry in that, the passenger turning the driver into a passenger, and it is not the kind of thing a lesser mind could ever pull off, borrowed pieces or not. The two sides of the argument end up locked together, neither able to fully win. One side says Rick is the greater mind because he creates the world the boy merely navigates. The other side says the boy is the greater mind because he conquered the creator inside the creator's own world again and again and walked away free every time. Counting inventions points one way, counting victories points the other. Each measure is real, and each measure leaves the other standing. And so the simple scoreboard, the one that just adds up wins and gadgets, turns out to be a poor tool for settling something this tangled. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Maybe that is the sign that the whole approach has been slightly wrong from the start. Measuring two minds by how many traps they escape or how many machines they build treats intelligence like a pile of trophies to be stacked and compared. There may be a deeper way to weigh a mind, one that has nothing to do with counting at all. Because for all their plans and inventions and victories, the man and the boy wanted profoundly different things out of their lives, and what a person chooses to point their intelligence at, what they build it all toward, might reveal more about that mind than any list of feats ever could. On that quieter question, the two of them split apart in a way that turns the entire contest on its head. Section 7. What they wanted. Counting inventions and counting victories has carried the argument as far as counting can carry it, and the two minds have ended up tangled in a knot that simple addition cannot cut. So it helps to set the scoreboard down entirely and ask a different kind of question, a quieter one. Not how much each of them could do, but what each of them actually wanted to do with all that power. A person reveals the shape of their mind not only in how cleverly they chase a goal, but in which goal they decide is worth chasing. And on that question, the man and the boy turn out to want almost opposite things, which says more about each of them than any trap they escaped. Look first at what the boy in the eye patch was truly after. Underneath all the scheming, strip away the puppet Rick, the stolen election, the broken wall, the team-up, and what is left at the bottom of every plan is a single, small, almost gentle wish. He wanted to be left alone. That is the whole of it. He did not want to rule the worlds. He did not want an army, or a throne for its own sake, or revenge on all of existence. He wanted out, away from Rick, away from the rigged little corner where a Morty is born to follow and serve, into some quiet place where no one would own him. The proof shows up the moment he finally gets free. With the entire wider reality open to him, with the most dangerous weapon ever built in his hands, he did not conquer anything. He found a calm, hidden home, gathered what he needed to keep it safe, and settled into a peaceful life by himself. He even said plainly that the only thing that ever made him evil was being fed up with his grandfather. His grand and terrible journey was, at heart, the story of someone trying very hard to get some peace and quiet. His origin says the same thing in miniature. He began as a Morty worn down by mistreatment, a kid who had simply had enough of being the smaller half. Everything that followed grew out of that one feeling, the wish to stop being used. His intelligence, vast as it is, was pointed the entire time at a single target, escape, and once he reached it, he stopped. He was done. He had what he wanted. There is a strange kind of clarity in that, and the clarity is worth taking seriously because it might be the strongest argument of all for calling him the smarter one. The boy knew exactly who he was. He knew exactly what he wanted. He never once got confused about it, never wandered, never sabotaged himself. He aimed his whole mind at one clear goal and hit it perfectly, and at the end of the road, he arrived somewhere calm and quiet and free. He solved the one problem that matters most and is hardest of all. He figured out how to be at peace. Now hold that up against Rick. The contrast is almost painful. Rick can do nearly anything. He can build worlds, escape any cage, topple any government, invent his way past the rules of reality itself. With all of that power, Rick is miserable. He drinks constantly. He hurts the people closest to him. He throws himself into danger as though he half wants it to end him. The smartest man in the universe has spent the entire show unable to do the one thing the boy did so cleanly, which is simply be okay. By the end of their biggest clash, the boy walks free into a quiet life of his own choosing, and Rick is left stranded in the dark, beaten, grieving, with nowhere to go. One of them got what he wanted. The other has everything and wants none of it. If being smart means knowing yourself, knowing what you want, and actually getting it, then the boy looks like the clear winner. And and Rick looks like a genius who never learned how to use his own gifts on the problem that mattered most. A mind that can crack the wall around infinity but cannot find a single peaceful day is a mind that has misplaced something important. The boy never misplaced it. He wanted peace. He understood that Rick was the thing standing between him and peace, and he removed Rick from his life with surgical care. Seen that way, the boy is not just clever, he is wise in a way Rick never managed to be. The trouble is that the boy's clarity came at a price the show is careful not to hide, and once that price is in view, the easy verdict gets harder again. The way the boy found his peace was by cutting every other person out of his life completely. His solution to the pain of being connected to someone was to make sure he would never be connected to anyone ever again. He looked at the bond between a Rick and a Morty, the strange, prickly, painful thread that runs through the whole series, and he decided the only safe thing to do was to sever it and walk away alone. Every person he ever dealt with, he dealt with as a tool. His grandfather became a puppet. The city's whole population became fuel. Even at his last moment with Morty, when he offered the boy a chance to come along, the offer was a lie told to prove a point. He does not have friends. He does not have family in any real sense. He has himself, his quiet house, and a weapon to keep everyone else away. That is what his perfect peace actually looks like up close. The boy answered a real question, and he answered it brilliantly, but the question he answered was a narrow one. He asked how to never be hurt by other people, and he found the answer by removing all other people. That is clean. It is also, in its way, a retreat. He solved the problem of connection by refusing to have any. The hardest version of the problem, the one most people actually live inside, is how to stay close to others when closeness brings pain, how to keep choosing people who can hurt you. The boy never had to solve that one because he opted out entirely. His calm comes from an empty house. Rick lives inside the harder problem, and that is where the case for him quietly turns. For all his cruelty and all his self-destruction, Rick keeps choosing to be near people. The clearest proof came early, in the brain scan, when a machine pulled up his private memories and showed years of him slipping into his grandson's life, watching the boy grow, choosing again and again to be there, until the smartest man in the universe sat strapped to a chair with tears in his eyes. He says, loudly, that Ricks do not care about Morty's. His own mind, laid bare, told a different story. Whatever Rick claims to feel, he keeps returning to the people in his life, even when it wrecks him, even when staying is harder than leaving. His whole great hunt points the same way. Rick spent decades chasing the worst version of himself across the worlds, not for power, not for fun, but because that other Rick had murdered his wife and his young daughter. The deepest wound Rick carries is the loss of people he loved, and his most relentless use of his genius was the search for the one who took them from him. A mind built around the absence of loved ones is a mind that, at its core, was shaped by love and by grief. Rick's pain comes from the same place the boy's peace does. The boy escaped connection. Rick was broken by it and kept walking back toward it anyway. This deserves an honest complication, because the show refuses to make Rick a hero about it. When Morty finally pressed him, he learned that Rick only came back to him after being abandoned by others, that the return was partly a man with nowhere else to go rather than a grand act of devotion. Rick's love is real, and it is also messy, self-serving, and unreliable. He does not choose people cleanly or nobly. He stumbles back toward them, often for the wrong reasons, often after hurting them first. The bond between him and Morty is not pretty. It is just real, and it is just persistent. In a way, the boy's life has nothing to match, so the quieter question splits the two of them down a line that has nothing to do with invention or cunning. The boy pointed his enormous mind at getting away from everyone and succeeded, and now lives alone and at peace. Rick pointed his even more enormous mind at a tangle of revenge and connection and loss, and lives surrounded by people and in pain. One of them found calm by emptying his life. The other stays in the crowded, painful middle of his, unable to leave and unable to be happy. Which of those is the smarter way to spend a great mind is a question that genuinely splits in two, and a fair look cannot pretend otherwise. From one angle, the boy is plainly wiser. He knew what he wanted, he got it, and he is at peace, which is more than Rick has ever managed. Peace is the rarest thing in the whole series, and the boy is the only major figure who actually reaches it. A mind that solves its own suffering has done something Rick, for all his power, never could. From the other angle, the boy reached his peace by shrinking his world down to a single person, himself, and a single goal: solitude. He never had to face the harder test, the one Rick fails and keeps showing up for anyway, which is how to live among people who can wound you. The boy's brilliance was real, and it was aimed at a smaller light. Rick's brilliance is just as real, and it is tangled up in the largest and messiest problem there is: the problem of other people, the problem of love, the problem of staying. There is a kind of intelligence in solving your pain by escaping it. There may be a deeper kind in refusing to escape, even when you easily could, even when staying costs you everything. Neither angle defeats the other, and that is the honest place this question leaves things. What it does do is reveal that the two minds are not really running the same race. The boy ran toward an empty quiet and won it. Rick runs, badly and forever, around the same crowded fire he cannot bring himself to leave. Calling one of them smarter for reaching peace assumes peace was the goal. Calling the other smarter for staying assumes staying was the point. The contest twist only works if both runners agreed on the finish line, and these two never did. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. All of which leaves the argument richer but still unsettled, circling the same two figures from a new height without quite landing on either. The invention count favors Rick. The victory count favors the boy. The question of what each wanted splits cleanly in half. Every measure tried so far has either tied or pointed in opposite directions at once. There is, though, one thing that has not yet been put under the light directly. One fact about the two of them that has nothing to do with what they built or what they longed for, and everything to do with what happened in the few moments their two minds actually faced each other across a room. Set everything else aside. Look only at those direct meetings, and a single uncomfortable pattern appears. The same result every time. And that pattern may be the closest thing to a real answer this whole story has to offer. Section 8. Face to face. Every measure tried so far has either tied or pulled in two directions at once. So it is worth setting all of it aside. The inventions, the wants, the philosophy, and looking only at the handful of moments when these two minds actually dealt with each other directly. Not what each could build alone. Not what each secretly longed for. Just the plain record of what happened in the rare times the man and the boy were caught in the same situation, pushing against each other. Stripped down to that, a single pattern appears, and it repeats with such consistency that it is hard to look away from once it is seen. In every direct dealing between them, the boy set the terms, and Rick reacted, every time, without a single exception. Their first tangle came in the very first season, and the strangest thing about it is that Rick never even knew it was a contest. The boy, hidden behind his puppet Rick, ran an entire plan that swept Rick up in it. Rick was blamed for a string of murders he did not commit. He was dragged before the leaders of the city, convicted, and very nearly put to death for crimes the boy had committed. He fought his way loose, hunted down what he thought was the real killer, watched that killer die, and walked away believing the whole matter was settled. The truth was that the real enemy, the mind behind all of it, stood quietly in a crowd a short distance away, slipped off an eye patch, crushed a controller underfoot, and vanished. While Rick congratulated himself on solving a problem he had completely misread, Rick did not lose that encounter so much as fail to notice he was in one. The boy played the smartest man in the universe like an instrument, used him as the perfect suspect, and Rick never saw a single string being pulled. A mind can lose no more completely than by not even knowing a game is being played. For 2 whole seasons after, Rick stayed blind. When the boy seized the city in the open, winning its vote and killing the hidden group of Ricks who thought they owned him, Rick was off on a side trip and missed all of it. And when he came back and was asked directly whether the rebuilt city was anything to worry about, Rick waved it away with total confidence. He said the place would never touch their lives again. The smartest man in the universe looked straight at the rising threat and dismissed it without a second thought, because it had never once occurred to him that a Morty could be the danger. The boy did not even need to be present to come out ahead. Rick's own blindness did the work for him. The first time Rick actually knew who he was facing came seasons later, and that encounter is the most revealing of all, because it shows exactly what the smartest man in the universe can manage against this particular enemy, even with full knowledge of who he is. Rick walked into the city, looked at its president, and recognized him instantly. He knew the face. He knew it for one specific reason, the single thread that ties the two of them together, which is that the boy is the only being in all of existence who ever managed to tamper with Rick's doorway gun. That recognition is real, and it matters, and it will come back into focus shortly. The point for now is what Rick did with it. Knowing exactly who his enemy was, standing in the same city as him, the best the smartest man in the universe could do was run. The whole encounter is Rick on the back foot, reacting to a situation the boy had built and controlled long before Rick arrived. Rick fights off some guards and flees. The boy springs a trap that turns the city's own people against themselves, hurting them to their deaths with a single clever command, and Rick can only keep moving, dragging Morty downward, hunting for an escape. Rick descends to the bottom of the city looking for fuel to get home, and the fuel has already been drained because the boy thought of that move long before Rick did. At every turn, Rick is one step behind, scrambling to answer a plan that was finished before he ever showed up. And when they finally reach the great engine, the roles are laid bare for anyone watching. The boy stands calm and explains the world, the wall, the cage, the whole truth, while Rick sits and listens, unable to stop any of it. The teacher of the entire show is reduced to a student. The boy opens his passage through the wall, escapes into the wider worlds, and leaves Rick stranded in the dark with a useless gun and no way home. From the moment Rick recognized him to the moment the boy vanished, Rick never once seized control of anything. He recognized his enemy perfectly and was helpless against him completely. There is even a small, cutting detail buried in that encounter. The boy offered Morty a chance to leave with him, and Rick, worn down, gave his grandson a quiet blessing to go. In that moment, Rick was not a player in the boy's plan at all. He was a bystander to it, standing off to the side while the boy decided the fate of the person Rick cared about most. The smartest man in the universe had been moved so far from the center of events that he was reduced to nodding along. The fourth and most recent dealing between them is the one that should, in theory, favor Rick the most, because this time they were on the same side, working toward the same goal. Even as allies, though, the pattern held without bending. The boy arrived on his own terms. A annoyed, summoned by the damage Rick's reckless hunt had done to his quiet home, choosing the moment and the manner of the meeting himself. The boy looked at how Rick was hunting and immediately saw the flaw, correcting the search of the smartest man in the universe as easily as an adult correcting a child's homework. The boy decided that helping Rick was the fastest way back to his own peace, so he helped, on his schedule, for his reasons. When the deadliest Rick of all had to be beaten, the boy was the one who slipped into disguise, overpowered him, and stole his terrible weapon, then chose to revive Rick and hand him the final blow like a gift. And when it was all over, the boy set the terms of the goodbye too, telling Rick and Morty plainly never to follow him. With a weapon in his hand strong enough to make the warning stick, Rick took his advice, followed his lead, accepted his help, and obeyed his terms. Even as a partner, the boy was the one running the operation, and Rick was the one going along with it. Line those four dealings up side by side, and the shape of it is impossible to miss. In the first, the boy used Rick as a pawn, and Rick never knew. In the second stretch, the boy took a whole city while Rick dismissed the danger entirely. In the third, Rick finally saw his enemy and could do nothing but flee and end up stranded. In the fourth, even as an ally, the boy chose how everything began, unfolded, and ended. Across every single direct encounter between them, the boy decided the terms, and Rick responded to them. Rick has never once forced the boy into a corner the boy did not choose to be in. Rick has never caught him, never trapped him, never outthought him in a moment that counted, never made him do anything against his will. The boy, by contrast, has fooled Rick, used Rick, escaped Rick, outplanned Rick, and even commanded Rick, repeatedly, calmly, and without ever once losing the upper hand. A direct contest of wits is the purest test there is. Two minds, the same situation, full stakes, and the simple question of who comes out ahead. Inventions can be argued about, wants can be weighed in a dozen ways. But when two people are caught in the same room with the same problem, the one who walks out having gotten what they wanted, on the terms they chose, is the one who won. By that test, the boy in the eye patch is undefeated against the smartest man in the universe. Not ahead on points, undefeated. The record between them does not have a single entry where Rick came out on top. Fairness demands one real point be placed on Rick's side of this, and it is not a small one. Rick is the only being in all the endless worlds who has ever even recognized the boy for what he is. Think about how striking that is against everything already covered. The leaders of the city never saw him coming. The hidden group of rich Ricks never saw him coming. The entire society of geniuses elected him without a clue. The deadliest Rick of all, a mind sharp enough to beat the main Rick, was blindsided by him too. Across thousands upon thousands of Ricks, every one of them a genius, not one ever perceived the threat in time, except this Rick. The main Rick is the single mind in existence, sharp enough to look at that small, calm boy and know, instantly, the danger standing in front of him. That perception is a genuine mark of how exceptional Rick is. Among all the geniuses the boy has ever moved among, only one could even see him clearly. The hard part for Rick is that seeing a threat and beating it are two very different things, and Rick has only ever managed the first. He can perceive the boy where no one else can, and then he loses to him anyway. Recognition without victory is a strange and lonely kind of edge. It means Rick understands exactly how badly he is being outthought in real time while it happens, and is still unable to do anything about it. The other Ricks at least had the mercy of not knowing. The main Rick gets to watch himself lose with full clarity. His sharpness lets him see the boy coming and still fail to stop him, which is, in some ways, a more complete kind of defeat than the blind ones the other Ricks suffered. So the direct record points hard in one direction, harder than any other measure tried so far. If smarter means who wins when the two minds actually meet, then the question has an uncomfortable answer, and the answer is the boy. He has bested Rick in their first encounter, their middle encounters, and their most recent one. As an enemy, and even as an ally, the smartest man in the universe has never solved the problem of this one particular Morty, and the show has given him 4 separate chances to do it. A thread of doubt has to be carried forward, though, because it ties back to something already uncovered, and an honest verdict cannot drop it. Winning every direct exchange is one thing. Winning them while leaning on the loser's own tools and knowledge is another. The boy outthought Rick again and again, yes, and he did it using plans pulled from Rick's mind, machines built by Ricks, and a world that Rick helped create. He dominates Rick on a field that Rick built. There is something dizzying in that, a victory and a debt wrapped around each other so tightly that pulling them apart feels impossible. The record says the boy always wins. The smaller print under the record says he always wins with pieces he took from the man he beats. Every angle has now been laid on the table. The count of inventions leans toward Rick, the maker of worlds. The count of victories, and especially the count of direct meetings, leans hard toward the boy, the one who beats Rick on Rick's own ground. The question of what each truly wanted splits cleanly in half. One mind chasing peace and finding it, the other chasing connection and breaking on it. And running underneath everything is that stubborn knot. The fact that the boy's every triumph was built on something borrowed from the very man he triumphed over. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is still one piece of these two minds that has not been set under the light on its own, and it has nothing to do with what they built, or what they won, or what they wanted. It has to do with time, with the way each of them thinks across it, and the difference there runs deeper than almost any of the rest. Before the question can finally be answered, that last difference is the one still left to weigh. Section 9. The long game. Before that final ruling, one last difference between the two minds deserves to be pulled out and studied on its own, because it quietly shapes everything else. Rick and the boy are both brilliant, but they are brilliant in two completely different ways. One is a master of the moment. The other is a master of time itself. And the gap between those two ways of being smart is its own answer hiding underneath the louder one. Rick is at his most dazzling when everything is already falling apart. Drop him into a disaster with no warning and no plan, and his mind lights up. The escape from the space prison is the clearest example. He turned himself in, yes, but the moment the plan met reality, it started breaking, and Rick simply rebuilt it on the spot. His body was destroyed, so he jumped into another. A team arrived to kill him, so he wore one of the killers. Every time the situation slipped sideways, he caught it mid-fall and bent it back to his purpose, thinking faster than the chaos could move. That is the heart of Rick's genius. He does not need a plan. He needs a problem, and the worse the problem, the brighter he burns. The clearest picture of this came the day Rick turned himself into a pickle. Faced with something as ordinary as sitting through a family meeting he did not want to attend, he chose instead to turn his whole body into a pickle to get out of it. The choice created an enormous mess, and the rest of that adventure was Rick improvising his way through it, building a working body out of bug and rat parts, fighting through a whole building full of armed enemies, surviving on nothing but quick thinking, and whatever happened to be lying around. It is one of the most impressive displays of his mind in the entire show, and it is also, underneath, a perfect picture of the pattern. The crisis was not forced on him. He invented it himself to dodge something small, and then dazzled everyone by escaping the trap he had walked into on purpose. There is a hidden cost buried in that gift, though, and the show returns to it again and again. A mind that shines in chaos is a mind that lives in chaos. Rick is forever solving emergencies, and a great many of those emergencies are ones he caused himself. He poisoned an entire world by accident and had to abandon it and move into a fresh one, burying the bodies of the family he replaced. He builds things that turn on him, makes enemies that come back, leaves messes that chase him across the worlds. His improvising never stops, because the trouble never stops, and the trouble never stops, partly because of how recklessly he lives. He is a genius at escaping traps, which means that Rick spends an astonishing amount of his life inside traps. There is something worth sitting with in how often Rick is caught off guard. A mind as powerful as his being surprised as frequently as it is should be a strange thing, and the reason it keeps happening is that Rick rarely looks far enough ahead to stop the surprise from coming. He trusts his ability to handle whatever appears, so he spends little effort making sure nothing appears. That trust is earned because he almost always does handle it. The cost is a life of constant ambush, one emergency after another. Each one survived, and almost none of them prevented. Stopping a disaster before it starts takes more foresight than surviving one after it hits, even though surviving one looks far more impressive from the outside. The boy works in the opposite direction entirely. He does not wait for the moment and then dazzle. He arranges the moment years before it arrives, so that when it finally comes, there is nothing left to improvise. His plan to escape the wall did not begin in the season where he escaped it. It began 4 seasons earlier, in his very first appearance, when he copied the plans out of Rick's mind. Everything after that was patient construction. He won the election. He took the throne. He quietly changed every doorway gun in the city, long before the night he would need them changed. He set the great engine in place. By the time the final hour arrived, the boy did not have to think on his feet at all, because he had already done all the thinking, slowly and carefully, over a span of time so long that nobody else even noticed a plan was underway. His planning goes deeper than simply setting pieces in place. He plans around how people will behave, which is far harder because people are unpredictable to almost everyone except him. When he wanted the city's population to walk into their own deaths, he did not order them toward the danger. He ordered them to stay still over and over, knowing that a frightened crowd told to stay will do the opposite and run, and that running would kill them on the guns he had already changed. He built the trap, and then he built a second trap inside the first, the one made of how he knew the crowd would react to the first. That is foresight aimed not at events but at minds, and aiming foresight at minds is the rarest and most dangerous version of it. He did not only predict what would happen, he predicted what everyone would choose to do about it and use their own choices against them. The escape through the wall is this long game in its purest form. To break out, the boy needed the plans hidden in Rick's mind, and he took them in his very first appearance, before Rick or the audience or anyone else knew there was a plan to serve. Then he waited. He let seasons pass. He built the rest of the pieces one at a time, each one looking like its own separate event. A strange villain here, a stolen election there, a quiet president doing quiet things, until the day they all clicked together at once, and the wall came down. Rick, who had helped build that wall and lived at its center his whole life, never once saw it coming because he was busy living in the present while the boy was busy living several years into the future. That is a different and rarer kind of intelligence. The improviser reacts to the board in front of him. The architect builds the board and hands his opponents the pieces. When the two finally stood in the same room, the difference showed itself completely. Rick walked into a situation the boy had finished designing seasons ago. The trap was already set, the fuel was already drained, the guns were already changed. The engine was already humming. All Rick could do, for all his brilliance, was react, beautifully and uselessly, to a game whose ending had been written long before he arrived. The fastest mind in the moment is still standing inside a moment that someone else built. Picture it the way two people might play a long game across a board. One player is astonishing at the move in front of him. Hand him any position, however ruined, and he will find the cleverest possible response, again and again, faster than anyone watching. The other player barely seems to look at the move in front of him because he set the whole game in motion 20 moves ago and already knows how it ends. The first player wins exchanges. The second player wins the game. A mind that masters the single move is a marvel and will beat almost everyone it ever faces. A mind that masters the whole game beats even the master of the single move, because by the time the brilliant response is needed, the ending has already been decided by choices made long before the board ever looked dangerous. There is a reason Rick's kind of brilliance is the one people notice and cheer, while the boy's kind slips by almost unseen. Improvising is loud. It happens right in front of everyone, in the middle of the action, with the clock running and the stakes high. And it is thrilling to watch a mind win a fight it had no time to prepare for. Long planning is silent. It happens off to the side, across months and years, in small, quiet moves that look like nothing on their own. Nobody applauds a single piece of a plan because a single piece looks harmless. The boy's whole strategy was built out of harmless-looking pieces, which is exactly why it worked, and exactly why the geniuses around him kept missing it. They were trained the same way the audience was trained to find the loud kind of cleverness impressive and to overlook the quiet kind entirely. The boy understood that too. He hid his genius inside the one shape that nobody in that world ever bothered to examine, the slow and patient kind, and he let everyone keep their eyes on the fireworks while he quietly rearranged the whole sky. Foresight, when it reaches far enough, beats quickness every time, and the reason is simple. A mind that reacts is always one step behind the world, answering what just happened. A mind that plans far enough ahead is several steps in front of the world, deciding what will happen before it does. Rick answers the present. The boy shapes the future, and then waits for the present to catch up to it. Quick reaction is a wonderful thing to watch, and there is a kind of beauty in Rick catching a falling plan and fixing it in midair. Underneath the beauty, though, is the plain fact that he is catching it because he did not see it falling in time. The boy is never caught off guard, not because he is luckier, but because he looked far enough ahead that nothing is ever a surprise. Fairness asks for one real point on Rick's side here, because his kind of mind is not weaker in every way. There are situations that no amount of planning can prepare for, moments where something truly impossible to foresee comes crashing in, and in those moments, Rick is the best there is. He adapts faster than anyone alive. A planner can be undone by the one thing he did not predict, and in theory, the boy could be too. The trouble for Rick is that across the entire show, almost nothing the boy failed to predict ever actually happened. His plans simply worked, step after step, year after year, while Rick stumbled from one surprise to the next. The improviser's gift only matters when you are surprised, and the boy arranged his life so that he almost never was. The two styles even explain the lives each one ends up living. Rick improvises because he is always in a crisis, and he is always in a crisis partly because he never plans far enough ahead to avoid one. The boy plans so far ahead that crisis rarely reaches him, and so his life, once he finally got it, is calm. The shape of their intelligence and the shape of their days match exactly. One mind is a brilliant scramble that never gets to rest. The other is a long, quiet design that, once complete, leaves its maker with nothing left to fix. So the way each of them moves through time becomes its own quiet measure. Rick is the greatest in the world at the next 5 minutes. The boy is the greatest in the world at the next 5 years. And in a contest of minds that has stretched across the entire run of the show, the one who thinks in years has stayed ahead of the one who thinks in minutes, from the first move to the last. Speed dazzles in the instant. Patience decides the outcome. When the smartest man in the universe finally met a mind patient enough to plan around him, his speed had nothing left to catch because everything had already happened. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Every angle has now been laid on the table. The count of what each one built, the count of who won when they met, the question of what each truly wanted, the plain record of their direct meetings, and now the very shape of how each mind works across time. There is nothing left to weigh and nothing left to turn over. The board is full, every piece of it in view at last, and the only thing remaining is to look at the whole of it and say, plainly and finally, which of these two minds is the smarter? Section 10, the verdict. A question asked this plainly deserves an answer just as plain. So here it is, with no hiding. Of these two minds, the boy in the eye patch is the smarter one. Not by the count of inventions where he loses, not only by the count of victories where he wins. The real reason sits underneath all of that, and it is quieter and stranger than the scoreboard suggests. Rick has to be given his full due first, because the case for the boy means nothing if it shrinks the old man into something he is not. Rick is the maker. He looked at the bare rules of reality and wrote new ones. Travel between the endless worlds, the discovery the whole series rests on, came out of his mind and no one else's. He powers a vehicle with a tiny universe he built by hand. He pours his own mind from body to walk out of a prison prison no one walks out of. The technology of the entire multiverse flows from him, and every clever being in the show, the boy included, has spent their life drinking from that spring. If the only question were who can create the most from nothing, the contest would end here, with Rick, and that is no small crown to wear. The space government that once captured him proved the point without meaning to. It ruled across countless worlds and commanded more scientists than anyone could count, and not one of them could work out how his doorway gun functioned. Their only path to the secret was to crawl inside his head and hope to watch him think it, and even that he turned into the tool of his own escape. The most powerful force in that part of existence, with every resource it had, could not match one old man working alone. That is the scale of Rick the Maker, and it has to stay in view, because the boy is about to be called the Greater Mind, and the claim only means something if the size of what he surpassed is honest. The trouble is that making things, even making whole worlds, is not the deepest measure of a mind. A person can build without end and still be blind to the one thing that matters most, which is the truth about himself. The highest form of intelligence is clear sight. It is the power to look at the whole of a situation, including the parts that hurt, including the parts about your own self you would rather not face, and to see them as they really are. By that measure, the deepest one, the boy stands above Rick, and the gap is wide. Clear sight reaches its highest form when it is turned inward, on the self, and this is the exact place Rick is weakest and the boy is strongest. Rick can see almost anything except the man in the mirror. The boy can see everything, the mirror included. He knew exactly what he was, exactly what he wanted, and exactly why, and he never once lied to himself about any of it. Rick has spent the entire show unable to do that, drowning the questions about himself rather than answering them. A mind that understands the whole universe but cannot understand its own heart has a hole at its very center. A mind that understands both has no such hole, and the boy is whole in the one place Rick is broken. Look at what Rick did with all his world-making power. He and the other Ricks built the wall around the worlds, walling off only the slice where Rick is the smartest and cutting it away from everything else. And then they stood inside it and called themselves the smartest beings alive. Rick knew the wall was there. He helped raise it. He sits at its exact center. He was never blind to the fact of it. What he could not see was what it said about him. He needed to be the smartest so badly that he sealed off infinity itself to guarantee it, because he could not bear to live in a reality where he might not be on top. A man does not wall off the endless worlds out of strength. He does it out of a fear so large that nothing smaller than a wall around everything could quiet it. Rick built a cage and called it a crown, and he spent his life inside it, telling himself the title was earned. There is a particular blindness in that choice, and it is the most telling thing about him. A mind truly sure of its own greatness would have no need to wall off the worlds where it might be beaten. It would simply face them. Rick could not. The very existence of the wall is a confession, written across infinity, that somewhere underneath all the swagger, Rick was afraid the title might not be true. He spent more genius hiding from that fear than most people spend living, and he never turned a single drop of it on the fear itself. The boy needed no wall. He was willing to walk straight into the worlds where Rick was not the smartest, into the open and unprotected, because being beaten somewhere out there frightened him far less than spending forever inside a safe and rigged little box. The boy looked at that same wall and saw it for exactly what it was. He understood that the whole shining system of Ricks was a comfortable crib built around men too frightened to face a world bigger than themselves. He saw that every Morty had been bred into a life of service inside it, and he refused. He understood the Ricks better than they understood themselves. He said it plainly, that every Rick uses old pain as an excuse to justify whatever he wants to do, and that is precisely what Rick had been doing for a lifetime without ever seeing it. The boy read the machinery of Rick's soul at a glance, the fear and the excuses and the need, while Rick, for all his genius, never managed to read his own. That is the heart of it. Rick has the facts and the boy has the sight. Rick knew the wall existed, the boy understood what it meant. Rick can build a tiny universe to power a car and still cannot look honestly at why he drinks, why he wounds the people closest to him, why he needed to be the best so badly he reshaped reality to make sure of it. The boy carries none of that blindness. His mind is clear in a way Rick's brilliant, aching mind has never once been. A genius who cannot see himself is a genius locked in a room with no mirror. A genius who can see everyone, including the genius across from him, and the truth that genius is running from is simply working on a higher level, and the boy has been on that level since the day he first appeared. This is where the last stubborn objection finally falls apart, the one about the boy leaning on Rick's tools. It looked at first like a weakness, that every great thing the boy did used plans, pulled from Rick's mind and machines built by Ricks. Held up to the light, it becomes the strongest proof of all. The boy did not need to outbuild Rick. He understood that outbuilding Rick was a waste of time. Why invent your own version of the wheel when the smartest man in the universe has already built the perfect one and left it lying in the road? The boy looked at Rick's mountain of creation and saw, clearly, that the sharper move was to take it, turn it, and aim it back at the man who made it. Using a builder's own greatest works to undo him, after seeing a truth the builder is too afraid to face, is not the lesser act. It is the sharper one. The passenger studied the driver so completely that he could drive the driver. Making is the louder gift, and it is the one one that gets the praise, because building a thing from nothing looks like magic. Seeing is the quieter gift, and it is the older and rarer one. Anyone can be impressed by what Rick builds. Almost no one can do what the boy does, which is look at a finished world and its maker, and understand both more truly than the maker himself ever managed. Things can be copied, taught, handed down. The clear eye cannot. It is the part of a mind that no invention can replace, and it is the part the boy holds and Rick does not. There is a limit hidden inside being the maker, and it is the last piece that tips the scale. A maker is strongest inside the thing he made. Take Rick out of the world built on his inventions, strip away the doorway guns, and the technology, and the rigged little corner where he has promised to be the smartest, and the certainty starts to wobble. His whole title, after all, only held up because the worlds where it failed had been walled away. A seer carries no such limit. The boy can be dropped into any situation, any world, any room full of strangers, and the first thing he will do is understand it, because understanding is not tied to any one place or any one set of tools. It travels with him. Rick is the king of a country he built and cannot leave. The boy is at home anywhere because his power is not a kingdom, but an eye, and an eye works just as well on the far side of the wall as it does at the center of it. That is the difference between owning the board and being able to read any board at all. The record of their meetings only confirms what clear sight already shows. Every single time the two of them dealt with each other, the boy set the terms and Rick reacted. The boy used him as an unknowing pawn and walked away clean. The boy took a whole city while Rick waved off the danger. The boy made Rick flee and left him stranded in the dark. The boy, even as an ally, decided how it all began and ended, fixed Rick's hunt, beat the enemy Rick could not beat, and handed Rick the victory like a coin tossed to a beggar. Rick held one edge through all of it, and it is a real one. He is the only mind in all the worlds sharp enough to even recognize the boy for the threat he is. Every other genius was blindsided. Only this Rick could see him coming, and that edge, in the end, makes the answer heavier rather than lighter. Rick is sharp enough to see the boy clearly and still cannot beat him. He knows, while it is happening, exactly how badly he is being outthought, and he can do nothing to stop it. The other geniuses, at least lost in ignorance. Rick loses with his eyes open when the single sharpest version of the smartest man in the universe can see the boy plainly and still falls short every time they meet. The matter is settled. The lives they ended up with seal the point. The boy used his clear sight to find the one thing keeping him a prisoner, and then he removed it and walked into peace. Rick uses his world-making power to build new escapes from a pain he has never understood well enough to escape, and he stays trapped. A mind that can find the source of its own suffering and cut it out is doing something Rick, with all his power, has never managed even once. The boy did not only win the contest of cleverness, he won the harder contest of pointing all that cleverness at the thing that actually mattered, his own freedom, and he is the only one of the two who is free at the end of it. None of this shrinks Rick into a fool. It places the two of them where they truly stand. Rick is a towering builder of worlds who is also a prisoner inside one of them, brilliant past measure, and blind in the single spot that decides everything. The boy is a clear-eyed reader of people and systems and selves, who saw the whole rigged game from the inside, named it out loud, and beat it with its own pieces, then chose a quiet life over a kingdom he could easily have kept. The maker and the seer are not the same kind of great, and across the whole length of this story, only one of them ever managed to fully understand the other, while the other never knew the contest had been lost. Set those two side by side and ask, in the full and honest meaning of the word, which one is smarter? And the answer keeps coming back to the smaller of them. So the question that started all of this finally has its answer. Of the two minds, the boy in the eye patch is the smarter one. Rick built the worlds, and that crown will always be his. But the boy understood those worlds, and the man who made them more clearly than Rick ever understood himself. He saw the cage when no one else could, beat the smartest man alive using the smartest man's own tools, and walked out into the only thing he ever wanted, a quiet life of his own. The grandfather spent his genius building a wall to feel like the smartest. The grandson spent his seeing straight through it. In a universe built to crown a Rick, the sharpest mind belonged to the small, dismissed boy who spent every adventure trailing quietly behind him.
If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.